Good morning. This is John from the Springs Mennonite Church. It's really good to be here with you today. Here we are in the middle of a week. We've been talking about what love means. And I want to continue that today by looking at a passage in First John. It's First John 3:16 to 18. Now, before I read that, I want to remind you of another John 3:16. And it's interesting to see how these two parallel each other. John 3:16, as you've probably heard, says, God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. And it starts out that God so loved the world. Now, that's John 3:16. Here's 1 John 3:16. We know what real love is because Jesus gave up his life for us. So we also ought to give up our lives for our brothers and sisters. If someone has enough money to live well and sees a brother or sister in need, but shows no compassion, how can God's love be in that person? Dear children, let's not merely say that we love each other. Let us show the truth by our actions. Our actions will show that we belong to the truth. So we will be confident when we stand before God. Even if we feel guilty, God is greater than our feelings, and he knows everything. Okay, here we go. John 3:16 talks about God loving us and how much he did that. I'm not going to stay here very long. I'm sure you've heard it before. If you haven't, well, go read it. It's a good thing to read. And we know about the life of Jesus, and he gave his life for us. So then this is written, I don't know, 60, 70 years later, maybe a little bit longer. And John, the same writer of the Gospel John, now writes the letter, and he says, we know what real love is because Jesus gave up his life for us. That fits back to John 3:16, as it says that's what it was. And he's saying, we know because we saw it, we were there. So, he says, because of that, so we ought also to give up our lives for our brothers and sisters. Now, he's not talking about here literally dying for them. Now, I suppose it could be that, depending on some strange circumstance. But he's not talking about that. He's talking about giving up, how do I say this? Giving up what's important, what we have, to share with others. In other words, he's talking about, as it says here, love is not merely saying that we do it. It's doing it. Love is not just saying the words, it's proven by our actions. Now, he lists here in verse 17, he says, if someone has enough money to live well and sees a brother or sister in need, but shows no compassion, how can God's love be in him? That's one way to show it. Now, I know. Be careful here, preacher, because you're talking about money, and people get real sensitive about money, especially theirs. But it's not theirs. That's the point. You see, God gave you the ability to get whatever you have. If he hadn't done that, nothing else would have mattered. I know in our culture we believe very strongly you work hard and you get what you work for. And yes, but no. If you weren't born here in the first place, you wouldn't have the opportunity to work hard and get what you get. See, the critical factor here is seeing who is the ultimate source of everything you have. And it's not you. It's not your hard work. Yes, you have to do that. Nobody's going to hand it to you. We're not talking about everybody just laying around and getting showered with stuff. Nah, I'm talking about that. But we're talking about God loving you. And one of the ways he's loved us here in the United States is that we have been born here and we have the privileges and the opportunities that come from being born here. Having lived in other countries, I've seen the difference. There's a lot more to the world than tourist places. There's a lot more that's really ugly than what you'd ever see. And most of us are spared a lot of that in our own culture. Now, I grant you, you may not have as much as you want. Life may not be as good as you hoped. Things may be going that or seem out of control. Your life may even be the pits. But I can tell you, it could be a whole lot worse. So what is this passage saying? It says that God loved us, and therefore we should love others. Not just say it, but do it. You know, to say you love your parents, if you still have parents, is one thing. To go over there and spend time with them is a whole different ballgame. And I know some of you live long distance away. My kids do. I have 1 out of 10 that lives reasonably close. 2, if depending on your definition of close. And I don't see them very often, but we talk. And they offer help if I need something or they ask. I'm not helpless yet, so I don't have to take them up for it, but they they are trying to show their concern other than just saying it. We as people in our communities need to show our concern by doing things, not just saying it. And one of the things this passage points out that we can do is share our stuff, our money, our possessions, our talents, our time. Think what would happen if all the Christians you know would this week give 2 hours of their time to help someone. Think what would happen in your life, however poor it is, if you stopped thinking about your life and thought about someone else's. You see, God changes the world one person at a time. You don't have to change the world. You don't have to change the neighborhood. You don't have to even change half the people you meet. You just have to show love to everyone that you meet and let God do the rest. And I assure you, if we'll do our part, he'll do his. When you think about it, I'll be back tomorrow with some more thoughts about what love means. If you have a need or a prayer concern, let us know. We'll do everything we can as fast as we can to help meet your need. Thanks so much for listening. You have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I'll talk to you again.